Are we ready to go?
Sure.
Give me the word. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Evans. I work in human resources at Kettering Medical Center. Have been for the last 3 years. We're here today in a retrospective sort of reflection time. 4 distinguished members of the faculty from days past and in the current years. I think it goes without saying that this group has had many fine years of teaching and experience at Kettering College of Medical Arts. And so we'd like to hear from them today about what it meant for them and what it still means for them to be at Kettering College. And so we'll be interviewing each of you with a few questions, and put your memory cap on. Try to think of the things that meant the most to you. As for me, I have some connection with Kettering College. Not only is my wife a faculty member here, but I met her when I took my job here at Kettering College as the chaplain of the college from 1990 to 1992. And those were wonderful years, and I want to thank KCMA for that wonderful gift. But I also want to thank all of you fine people here for taking me in as a young chaplain and guiding me when I was still trying to find my way. Each of you have had a part to play in my experience here. And so I think all of these folks here would like to hear then from you about what it has meant for you to be at KCMA. So I'd like to ask Gene Callan here, who I'm going to dub as Mr. KCMA. I don't know if anyone would have any problem with that title, but Gene, you were the Dean of Student Affairs, or Academic Affairs, I believe, when I was here. What brought you to KCMA, and what job did they give you when you came?
I did not have a job description.
Duties as otherwise assigned?
At those first years, you did whatever needed to be done. And that is not an exaggeration. But I've been at Mount Vernon Academy for 16 years. And they had a board meeting here in the old Nelson Auditorium. And I was sitting beside Dr. Sanford, who was the first, at that time he was the first dean. And I said, no, if you ever have any opening here you think I would fit in, I'd be happy to consider it. And he got up and left the room and went into where the board was meeting. And then a few days later, Mr. Nelson was on his way to Worthington to a board meeting for the Worthington Foods in the hospital. And he called and asked if he could come up and visit with me. And I had probably, 3 or 4 days before, they'd already asked if I'd be interested in being sponsored to go to Ohio State, get a doctorate and so forth. I really didn't, that just wasn't my thing. And I said, but if Kettering would, and at the time, Mount Vernon Academy was going full blast. We had 350 students, and it was a different era than we're in now. And I said, if they would ask me to, and I named off all the things, that any of these I'd be happy to do. George Nelson came in my office and sat down, and he said, we decided that you're not interested in the doctorate degree, and we aren't sure we can sponsor another one right now. Would you be interested in, and he named down almost identically, word for word, what I just said a few days before my work. So I felt, I don't dare say anything, but yes. And that's the way it started. And I remember it was in April, and I started officially July 1. And the first time I came down,
Tell them what year.
1967. And I was 40 years old.
Some of us are still in high school.
Just a couple of weeks ago, I celebrated my 80th, so that's
great. That's great. So you served how many years at KCMA?
24.
24.
The last count I had, I don't think, how many years have you been here, Carol?
26.
26, she's outnumbered. For a long time, I'd been here the longest of any, but I was suspicious that, I told her today she probably came here at 16 or something. So that's how.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced when you came here?
There, we didn't have a handbook, we didn't have an application blank, we didn't have any of those things. So the first thing we did was, we said, well, what can we do quick? So we contacted Andrews, we contacted CUC, and said, just send us a sample of everything you've got. We thought at least that would give us a running start. And when I started coming down in April of '67 on Thursday. And the first time I came down, there was a stack, probably no more than 2 inches of applications that people had written in, made contacts, and there were just folders there with a little bit of information in it, and that's where we started. And, you know,
You just had to write the cookbook.
you had to write the cookbook, and we had a goal of, we hoped we could have 100. And when we got right down to the opening of school, it was 99, and I can still remember threatening to enroll my dog. I didn't. But we really wanted 100. And you know, it was exciting because we were starting from nothing, and we had the opportunity of making a lot of decisions of how we wanted to do it, what we wanted to do. And, it was just the morale couldn't have been better, and yet we had nothing to be in high morale about, except the challenge of it and the excitement of it. And it was just, I can't remember ever seeing a job description, because you knew you just did. I taught a class, I did workshops for the hospital, and I talked to your new business manager today and welcomed him. I thought it was wonderful, and I reminded him that in 1967, our little office, up wherever it is now, I'll turn around this building, we took care of all student finances, we took care of student aid, we did registrar's work, we did admissions, we ran the bookstore.
And we taught.
And
taught.
Yeah. And yet, I never felt persecuted, or you know, you just did what needed to be done, and that's all there was to it.
Wow, it sounds like you dove in head first, and that's great. Thank you, Gene. We'll come back to you a little bit later today. Carol, you were here when Gene came. And so what we won't go back very far beyond that, but
She came here long before I left.
Well, I had the opportunity to come here in a different capacity to start with, as a student. And I was working in Massachusetts in a hospital as a licensed practical nurse. And I was working on a med-surg unit, and this young fellow came, and he was a respiratory therapist. And I was talking about going to school, and I had my name on several colleges' waiting list, with a 3-year waiting list in the Boston area. And he said, you need to go to Kettering College. And I said, what? Where is that? And I'd never heard of Kettering College, and he had just graduated from there as a respiratory therapist. So, he was telling me all the good and wonderful things about the things that Mr. Callan was just describing. And so I put in an application, and I don't know if it got lost in the mail, because I'd applied for the regular nursing program, but to my pleasure, they were starting up an advanced placement LPN program. And I got a call from Anna May, who said, can you be here in 3 weeks? And at that point, I was working for a physician, and I was afraid to even ask him, should I go? And he said, by all means, this is an opportunity for you to expand your education, go. So I came to Kettering College. I arrived on a Friday, had no place to stay, stayed in a motel for the weekend, arrived at the nursing office on a Monday morning when classes had already started. I didn't have any books, I didn't have my uniforms, I didn't even know where I was supposed to be. So the first month or so was quite a transition period for me, to the point where Anna Mae was walking down the hall one day, and she put her arm around me and she said, I'm just so glad you're here. And I said, well, I'm not sure, but I'm glad. But, I was here for a year and finished up my RN degree. And I graduated on Saturday night, and I was leaving Sunday morning to go back to Massachusetts. And 26 years later, the Lord had another plan for me.
You got waylaid.
The Lord definitely had a different plan for me.
Well, now, you've been in the nursing department then since that time.
Right.
There had to have been some changes since the day that you took office
Oh,
and
my.
to today. What were some of the most significant things that you saw change in nursing during that time?
Well, I worked over at the medical center for a few years, and then I went back to school and got my bachelor's degree, and then I worked on my master's degree. And, I can't even begin to tell you what changes have happened in nursing. I mean, nursing changes every year. I can't go back to the time of Mrs. Brendel with the starched uniforms, but I certainly can't go back to a time in nursing that is not the same as it is today. It's definitely not the same. It has changed in some ways for the good, and some ways I think there are some losses.
Sure. Sure. Thank you, Carol.
But it's been an exciting journey.
Yes. Well, the person sitting next to you, Margaret Rodenberg, you've been here 1 or 2 years,
Yeah, one of you.
at least recently,
Yeah,
sort of off and on.
yeah, right. I couldn't stand to retire.
Well, tell us about when you came on board at KC.
Okay.
What brought you here?
I started in '69, and I had been working for Monsanto and had 4 little kids and said, I just can't do this. So I quit research work and I was at home. And I got a call from a friend that worked at Monsanto saying, there's this new college that's looking for a part-time chemistry teacher. I just need 1 class taught. So I gathered up my thesis, my vitae, my grades, my recommendations, I had a pile, and I came in to interview with Van Horn, Dr. Van Horn, and Dean Sanborn. And I walked in the door with all this stuff. The first thing they did was they took me down to the old chemistry labs, which were brand new then, and said, here's where you're gonna work. What? I gotta sell myself, Here's where you're gonna work. So that's how I got here. And I have the distinction of being the first non-Adventist on the faculty.
Since then, it's pretty well evened out. You have both in place here at KCMA.
Yeah.
We certainly cherish and value the differences in spiritual and faith backgrounds that people bring.
That's something the college has done from the very beginning. From the very beginning. And I think it's why I felt comfortable right away at the very beginning. I did grow up in a conservative Lutheran background. Very much the same basic ideals and so forth that I encountered here. So I felt very comfortable as part of the college.
What was the trickiest part about becoming a teacher and actually getting on board here? What did you face right away?
Well, of course, there's nothing in the chem lab. So it was buying all the basic supplies and everything to first get up and running. And my first class had Bert Brendel in it, and Wold, what's his name? From the Wayne Wold were in my first class. I had 5 students in that first class. And so they were very gentle to me, which I appreciate very much because I had not taught a lick. And so it was very nice.
I would dare say that that's a word that most students would use with you too, Margaret. So you're gentle with them.
I hope. Not too gentle though. Make them work.
Goes without saying. Well, the person sitting to your right is Larry Beneke, and Larry, you've also put in some years here at Kettering, and you're currently teaching. And,
I'm the new kid. With this illustrious group, I'm quite honored to be included on this group. I have a relatively long period at the medical center. I started in 1974, late 1974, at the big house across the street here in the radiology department. I just was a fresh graduate from a radiography program out on the West Coast. I'm not an Adventist, or wasn't an Adventist at that time. Came here, so it was kind of a foreign environment for me to move into the working area. But I was in the department for a little over a year, and I had the opportunity to meet with Merle Peterson and Dale Ariano, and as a matter of fact, Frank Brewster and Max Grady, and a few others were involved in their training, radiography training at that time. And Merle had decided to move on to a place in, I think it's Illinois, Hinsdale, and take over some management possibilities up there. So Dale asked me if I would be interested in teaching. So I had already had my baccalaureate degree, and I was new to the field, new to the to the area. Although I grew up close to here, so I wasn't too much of a stranger to the Miami Valley. But I jumped at the chance. That was in 1975. So I came over for the first time to the college in '75, and had a nice experience over here. Was treated very well. Understood, got to know the culture of Kettering College of Medical Arts a little bit better at that point in time. Just as I was getting comfortable, the department asked me to come back and take over the managing, one of the managing roles next door. First mistake I made in my career was going back over there and leaving the college, but came to my senses a few years later. But I was over there for a few years, then came back here in 1985. So I was fortunate to come in at that point in time. Dr. Williams was the president, and Mr. Kylan was still the boss running the show, and that huge student services office of like all 3 or 4 people. And so it came into that as an instructor and helped with the clinical coordinating and radiography. Had an excellent experience, been here ever since with that. Got to see a lot of students that went through the system, and that's the real positive part that I've had with the institution that way. My biggest challenge coming over here, not having come from an educational background, is learning how to teach effectively. Not that far distant from being a student myself in radiography. I had a pretty basic idea of what to do, but it was a steep learning curve for me. I was fortunate enough to even take a class from Mrs. Applegate, Frank, Max, and I decided we were going to put our students through A&P 1 and 2, and we better get in the trenches and see what it was like. So we taught in the morning, and then went in the afternoon and took the A&P classes over 2 semesters. So learning experience that way. Although we'd had the courses before, but it was just seeing what the students were experiencing and learning from their perspective what their frustrations and things were. So.
Now, what impresses me about everything that all of you said is you've been here for some time, easily more than a century put together, if not a century and a half probably. There had to be something that kept you here, something that either in terms of your own personal philosophy or commitment that made you want to stay at KCMA. What was that?
I'd like to go back to Carol. One of the strong emphasis that we had was with the LPNs, because we recognized that there were so many capable people that needed the opportunity to move up. And going back to 1967, you have to realize that in Ohio and in the Adventist denomination, junior colleges were almost an unheard of something or another. They weren't sure what kind of an animal we were. It took a lot of dedication and a lot of risk-taking on the part of all of those first faculty members to risk their professional careers going to this junior college. In fact, the first 2 or maybe 3 years, the faculty and as registrar, director of admissions, and all whatever we were doing, we were never invited to any state or national conventions on the junior college level. But there was a lot of agitation for it, and as things changed, then we were invited, and we went and were involved and enjoyed the fellowship with the people from all over the country. But you have to realize what a different era we were then.
It was really experimental.
Yes, yes, and not well thought of. Now California was well ahead in the junior colleges, but not here. But people like Carol, we had a real burden for, to give them the opportunity to advance their education. There's a whole new thing in planning, what state boards would allow us to take, and, you know, the whole works. But that was one of the things that we were very much dedicated to do. And thinking in terms of Margaret as being the first non-Adventist. But I could say honestly, even in her presence, that Margaret was one of my best buddies the whole years we were here. And believe it or not, we often talked about religion. We had so much in common and so many things that we could share that in my own personal Christian growth, I think one of the best things that ever happened to me was being a part of Kettering College of Medical Arts.
Larry, what did that do for you to realize this was a Christian college? How has that been part of your experience here?
When I first got here, I was raised in the United Church of Christ and the Methodist Church, but I wasn't a strong Christian. I didn't have real strong roots. My parents were conservative Christians, but I just didn't pick up on that as a young adult. When I got here, when the whole culture was involved in Christianity and spiritual education, that got my attention. It took me a while to finally be baptized, but 2005 was when I became a member of the church across the street here. But it was that commitment to a higher degree of education that got my attention and held me. Certainly the people, the examples.
Oh, to be sure.
And I think it just makes you, it made me much stronger in my own beliefs by being with and communicating and being in this culture and so forth, you know. I saw the similarities and saw the difference, but it strengthened me as an individual. And I hear that from my colleagues now, even the non-Adventist colleagues and the Adventists, saying how much they appreciate the mixture of the faculty and the student body, because it does make you think. You don't accept something just because it's what you were raised in all your life. You start to question, why do I believe this way when this is, you know, somebody else's belief, and you start to think, and it makes you stronger. In whatever way, it makes you form in your own mind and become more of a person, a whole person.
Carol, you know, you and I, when I was a chaplain here, we sometimes had conversations about students, and what role would you say that your faith has played in doing ministry at a college like this versus just being a teacher at another college?
I don't know how people do without it. I really don't. When I came here to Kettering as a student, I was absolutely impressed with the dedication and the mission and the service that was just so much a part of the people who were here at that point in time. I think back to the teachers that I had when I was in school, but then as I started teaching, it just floods my soul with warm memories about the dedicated teachers that nurtured me to become a dedicated teacher. And I don't think I would have survived without it. But students come, particularly today, with just incredible burdens in their lives. And I don't know how just talking to them isn't enough. They need to know that there's strength beyond themselves and us. They need to know that there's someone out there who cares about who they are and what's going on in their lives. And I just, it's just a wonderful opportunity for me to have students come in and talk with me, and we can pray together, and we can maybe look at additional resources for them. And it's just been a growth experience for me, and hopefully for some of them.
Gina, I thought I saw some
Yeah,
words.
well, one of the areas that we were quite different at that time, beginning from scratch, is the level of qualifying scholarship that many of the students had. Without having the exact figures before me, I would say the first class we accepted of 99 students, probably only half of them would be accepted today in Kettering College. And yet, of that half that really didn't have high qualifications, the vast majority of them, with a lot of nurturing, a lot of coaxing, a lot of love and attention, have gone on to make wonderful nurses, administrators. Now, I could talk a lot about this, but my real concern is how many outstanding people do colleges miss if they're accepting almost totally by GPA or whatnot? Because we could name from those first one or two classes some outstanding people that really didn't qualify to be accepted. But we were desperate for students, and they were desperate for the opportunity of education. And we've often talked about it, some of us that were here to begin with, what a wonderful experience it was. And believe me, and Carol will verify this, a lot of the nursing staff really counseled and worked with to get them through. But they did it, they passed state boards, and many of them made wonderful bedside nurses as well as administrators. And I've always felt gratified to have given that opportunity to students that probably today wouldn't get it. I doubt, but maybe.
Well, this brings up the thought that over the years, you certainly had experiences with students in which you felt like you made an impact
Yes.
in their life. You changed something for them, you gave them a chance, you gave them a break. As you think back over your experience here, does anyone come to your mind or an experience come to your mind about an impact that you had on a student?
Well, one of the things that's kind of scary, when I go to our camp meetings, our alumni, and a student will walk up and say, "Mr. Cowling, do you remember when you told me thus and so?"
No.
That's what I said. Let's hope it's good. But it emphasizes that as teachers and faculty and staff, they remember us and remember what we said, but in 40 years, 16 on the secondary level and 24 on the college level, that's a lot of people. But it is so challenging when you realize, and even one of your faculty back here reminded me one day of what I'd said to her, and I didn't remember it, but I said, "Yeah, that sounds like something I would have said." But it's a challenge to be able to know that many years later, that students still remember how they were treated, what you said to them, and you just hope and pray that it was the right thing.
Well, do any of you have any favorite memories of something like that? Anyone that you had an impact on, or a student came and said, "Well, you don't remember this"?
One immediately comes to mind for me. We have a student who met the requirements for admission, but just. And she did very well in the clinical portion of her nursing program. Excuse me. And she struggled in the classroom. And about 3 months before she graduated, she came into my office and she said, "Carol, I'm not going to make it. I'm just not going to pass the state board exam." I said, "Yes, you are." And we worked together for 3 months preparing her for that.
This was time outside the classroom, just your time with her.
And she, after she graduated, she moved to Pennsylvania. And as soon as she got her results from her state board exam, she called me and she was ecstatic. And she said, "You did it, you did it." And I said, "No, I didn't do it, you did it." But that's one that comes to mind just right off the top of my head, because that made such an impact on me. You know, I understand there's lots of different ways to learn, but I don't think there's any replacement for that nurturing that happens at Kettering College. I just don't.
Well, I remember some things that happened while I was here, some that touched me, some were funny. I remember when Jill and I got married, that the faculty threw us a shower afterwards, and everybody seemed to be focused on what to get for the bride. Crystal and bowls and all kinds of things that would, you know, make a caterer rejoice, but I missed power tools. And Margaret Rodenberg came after that, and she gave me a power screwdriver. Now, that just stands out in my mind about KCMA, that little event. Someone noticed me. And we used to play tennis together, too.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
it was a lot of fun.
We had a lot of fun.
Well, you know, when you think about your years at KCMA, do you have any memories of funny or significant events that had an impact on you or that you remember?
Oh, I've got one on Bert Brindle. Actually, it's on me, not on him. You know, I told you how this first class was so nice to me, gentle. I was, you know, fresh PhD. I'd worked in industry a little bit, but I hadn't taught much. And we were talking about diamonds. And I said, in class, you know, what do you suppose diamonds are made from? How do they make diamonds? You know, I wanted to get at carbon, you know, and all this. And Bert pops up and says, from peanut butter. And I said, peanut butter? And I started laughing my head off, which you never do as a student. I laughed my head off. And he said, yes, and I'll show you. And he went to the library and he got this book, one of these life books on chemistry, and it said in there how you could make diamonds from peanut butter, putting them under pressure. And so that sticks in my mind so clear that peanut butter can make diamonds from peanut butter.
I would have to know the chemical reactions necessary to do that. Larry, do any memories come to you?
The one, countless student memories and good and faculty get-togethers and things like that, but the one of the thing that sticks out in my mind, we used to have a spring raffle or auction where we would do some things in the gymnasium. All the student body would come in and the faculty would donate certain things. I did one thing one time, this is kind of a funny thing, if you don't go back far enough, you know that I like to hunt wild turkeys in the springtime, and I have a series of calls and things, mechanical things, and so I auctioned off a turkey calling seminar to the student body, and lo and behold, somebody paid, the sonography class paid $15 to have me come in and do my sonography call. But the funny thing about that was, not this one, but I was demonstrating my calls and all that sort of thing, and Ed Petchy came in from the sideline and put his head on my shoulder like he had been a turkey. Anyway, so that's my funny story.
Care to give a demonstration?
No, didn't bring my tools. But countless student things, they always crack me up with the ideas and the funniest things that you do. Love that.
Well, do any of you remember the one time when the faculty put on a program and student now senior moment. You know, Lois Pratt, Dean Pratt dressed up as Miss KCMA, and Mary made him this flowing gown. You remember it, Cheryl?
Wasn't that the same time when Dr. Bevan got kind of tied up on the stage and you gals sang 9 to 5?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They did the 9 to 5. And it was Mary, and it was
Mary Jo.
Mary Jo, and somebody, yeah, and And I know, like, Mary had a walker, we were old ladies, you know, we were secretaries, you know, we're tying up Dr. Bevan, and that was part, I mean, we used to have great fun doing those kinds of things. Sometimes the faculty did it, or a number of your students put one on. Edith and I did one, what was it called, Big and Little Wizard or something?
You
We
were,
did-
and Bert was the one worked with us on this one. You were Big Whiz and I was
Little Whiz, yes, and we did, you know, chemical experiments and things like this as our little show. We had a lot of fun back there, back then, doing those kinds of things.
Well, speaking of fun people, Mary Jo Pyle, who could not be with us today, she was going to be on this panel. What do you remember about working with her, her being here?
Our hugs.
Hugs.
Her hugs. We had hugs for everybody. Yeah.
Particularly when you needed one.
She was one of the people who worked in my office, yes. She was, had a real talent to see students that needed a little extra attention, and the ability to reach out to them in a way that is not everyone's gift.
Certainly Mother KCMA.
Yeah.
She was a nurturing person. Well, you know, it just brings up all kinds of fond memories as you start thinking. What, you know, you certainly had significant events that happened here, just things that you remember with fondness, or people that you remember with fondness. Talk about that.
Dr. Trott. Remember Dr. Trott? Important he was in starting the PA program, and what a kind, gentle man he was. Good tennis player too.
Is that right? You
Yeah,
got to play with him.
We used to play with him, and Dr. Bevan.
My early days at Kettering, the first time, I remember the faculty meetings, faculty forums, if they called them at that time. Dr. Bevan would get up, and I would look forward to that. I just loved to hear that man speak.
Yes.
He could get a subject down to its core and present it that way. I just, as a new person on the campus at that point in time, I very much look forward to hearing him speak. Whether it was in faculty forum or just in meetings and things like that. Just had a wonderful way of words.
I would say this was an unhappy experience, but I still think it's important in order to have a feel of some of the roads that this college has gone down. The first, I don't remember how many years, 10, 15, maybe even more than that, we required extra summers with lab work, clinic work. Our requirements were far, far beyond the normal two-year associate degree nursing program. And we came up to an accreditation with, for state boards. And they said you absolutely must cut back on your class requirements, on your clinic requirements. You can't teach this. And we were really very proud of our program because we felt like we were turning out first-class, top-notch nurses. And that was the hardest thing for me to accept. And some of the folks on the faculty, they knew I never had any opinions or but you know, that stands out in my mind. I mean, I recognized what they were saying, that we were doing too much what needed to be done at the bachelor level and all that stuff. But still, we had put so much time and effort in developing this outstanding nursing program. The last summer that they would be here, we had graduation then in the last of August, and to have to cut back and feel like this program that we felt so good about, now we have to eliminate this and eliminate that and come back to this. And I still feel that it wasn't a good thing to do, but I reconciled it.
Yeah, there are both sides when you think about the
Yeah.
memories, you know, the
Yeah.
unpleasant experiences, which we'd rather not think about, which were there. And it sort of brings to mind a question, what would you do differently if you had some things to do over again?
Mr. Callan said I came at 16. I would have done this at 18. And not when I did.
A little tough on you at 16.
Yeah. The only thing I could have done differently was, as Carol said, started earlier. I would have really liked to get into education earlier because I thoroughly enjoy it and been here for a number of years doing that. So if I could have made up my mind at an earlier age, but that's about the only thing I would have done differently.
Sounds like you pretty much enjoyed everything that you did. Not too many regrets.
One of the nice things about growing old is that you just, you know, there's so many things. I'm sure there was a day or two somewhere in those 24 years I shot somebody. But, you know, I look back on it now, and it's just really such a delightful experience that I feel really blessed to have had the opportunity to work with teenager, high school age kids for 16 years, 24 years at Kettering College. I have so many good memories about so many students and faculty that I just treasure it as a marvelous experience. And realizing now I'm in my 16th year of retirement, I thank the Lord every morning that I'm enabled to be on 2 feet and enjoying life. You know, and I'd have to stop and think about anyone that I really remember being angry and upset about. You know, it isn't that important. That isn't my nature. But I can remember so many just good things about people, and the students, and the dedication for the first, I would say the first 10 years or thereabouts. It took real dedication to go through all, it seemed like every week, slightly exaggerated, that we were being evaluated for some accreditation or something constantly. And it was always very apprehensive, wondering, your programs, we have all of these, for nursing, for respiratory, every one of these, you have all of these forms to fill out. There's probably even more of them now, but even those traumatic kind of experiences, you look back on them, and I don't think we ever failed any of them, did we? If we did, that's one of the things I've forgotten too.
Well, I think one of the things that not everybody realizes, but when the college started, almost within the first couple of years, you lost Dean Sanborn.
Yes.
Because he was basically the president, and I started in the summer, and he died that Christmas. And then we were without a president, rolled out president for what would have been almost,
Well, it's been a year now.
almost, yeah.
A year.
And that basically Mr. Cowling and Mr. Nelson would meet, and they were running the nitty-gritty. We were running the school at that time.
Well, we didn't have anything else to do.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that was a traumatic thing to happen to college, right as it's getting up and starting as that happened.
But in this connection too, the medical center, well, Kettering College, or Kettering Hospital at that time, they had a difficult time to find someone that was willing to come here and be the chief executive officer of this new junior college beast, whatever it is out there. And Dr. Sanford had had a serious heart attack 2 or 3 years before that. He was at Salem College in West Virginia, and he agreed to come and be the starting of the college. And he put a lot of effort in it, and I remember about the middle of the first year, one day I asked Anna Mae, I said, Anna Mae, come in, we need to talk. As you know, we have several ways we can approach the problem. We could go to the board and talk about the things that we were observing with his health and memory and so forth. Or we could do this, or behind the scenes, we'll just roll up our sleeves, do it, let him still be there, and we did it. And I look back on that as a real blessing to all of us, that we nurtured him along so that he felt good about it right up to he was in his garage. It was a day or two before Christmas, and he dropped dead in his garage.
Mm-hmm.
But
So you really felt supported.
oh well, yes. In fact, I don't think he sensed what we were doing.
It's, to me, people is really what I think about when I think about KCMA, the people that had an impact on me. And I want to turn that question over to you. Who had the biggest impact on you, or who had a significant impact on you over your experience of being here? What was that about?
That man right
That
there,
man?
that man right there, the biggest influence on me. And I came in as a novice, and I learned more about teaching and philosophy and life and everything just by sitting and visiting with Mr. Conley.
Probably anime for the largest portion, but with very, very fond memories. Mrs. Brendel, Jerry Hill, Lois Pratt, some of the early nursing faculty who just nurtured me into, if I could, and I would tell them, if I could become half the teacher you are, I would be very happy, because they were just marvelous, marvelous role models for me.
You mentioned anime. I remember reading anime and asking her, "How are you?" Wow. If you ask anime Yvonne, "How are you?" she'll give you a rather lengthy response. It's not a casual greeting. I remember that about her. It's made me readdress the way I greet people. I don't know if any of you ever had that experience.
But I also appreciated at the time the vision of the administrative group at the college when I first started. To me, there was a tremendous vision for the future for Kettering College.
Yes.
Dr. Bevan, Dr. Williams, some of the presidents that we had, or deans, or whatever they were called. They changed as the years changed.
Yes. Larry, who had an impact on you?
I'm very impressionable, so I've been impacted pretty much by everybody I've met. And faculty and staff.
Some for some reasons and some for others.
The first time I knew Kettering College was pretty special was obviously when I met Dr. Bevan. But the biggest impact on me was when Dale Ariana hired me the second time. When I was, some of you probably don't know this, when I was in management over at the medical center in the radiology department, the college and the medical center sometimes locked horns. And there were some ill feelings every once in a while. And Dale and I, even though I had worked for him for a short time early on, he had faith or insight to offer me a job, even though we'd not come to blows, but certainly had some verbal altercations from time to time over policies and things. But he had the faith in me to bring me back into the fold. So countless people had influences on me, from the lowly students who taught me how to be humble, to my current colleagues.
Well, this has been such a special time together, just listening to you tell your stories and to share what it's meant to you. I've certainly seen you through the full range of emotions as you recall events that happened and people who had an impact on you. And I just want to say that every one of you had an impact on me in a very positive way. Examples of people who I believe are worthy to be emulated in any profession. And so that's a real gift to me, besides my wife. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. I'm sure that if we could get almost any of you up here who are at KCMA, you'd have stories to tell and to share, and maybe you want to do that yet today. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for sharing your stories and your memories with us at Kettering College of Medical Arts.
Thank you, sir.
Teresa?
And I would like Larry to explain the noise and all that's going on out here in the hall.
No, Larry's not responsible for everything.
You'll notice the classroom furniture here is fairly unique to if anything you've seen in the college in the past. We did a lot of time and research on how this to look. Well, the initial delivery in August didn't deliver everything. So this is the last segment of the tables. So we have all of the chairs, I think, in the rooms, but certainly the tables were a little bit low in number. So that's what's going on out there. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and this was the day they could deliver. So thank you for putting up with the banging and the banging. So, I'm going to stand up. Yeah, I hope you notice the flexibility of these. This is the new style of education, learning center. We're much more mobile and flexible.
What we've noticed is we all have wheelchairs.
Long before our time.
That's good. That was very good.
Yeah. Started out.
Yeah, these are the ones that tell you.